Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, today I want to continue what we did. I don't want to waste any time. I want to make sure we get everything done. I want to go through the defensive players. And again, we're going to look at PFF, their grades, PFF stats, and NFL Pros stats. Again, try to get a little bit more of a fuller picture and whatnot. And I'm thinking if we pick up the pace, we should be able to cover a few other things. But I do also want to look at team statistics and whatnot. One of the things I've been saying a lot, and again, I don't like people saying things and not being able to back it up. And there's a lot of things that I'm observing, and so I say that I'm observing it, but it's good to try to see if you can look it up. Some of it is really hard to find out, and then it dawned on me like, oh, I kind of can look that up. I've been mentioning how it feels like when Hafley wants to dial up a pressure, he can. But the whole front four thing hasn't been successful, and there is a lot of truth to that. In fact, there's another thing that I've been saying that actually kind of ties it all together, and that is my problem with when we bring extra pressure and actually get pressure is that the ball comes out really quick, and they're not actually able to successfully get to the quarterback. You know, there's an instant completion, and it looks like that's kind of what's happening. We'll get to that after we get done through the individual players, but it's kind of a interesting thing, and the Packers kind of rank highly in both cases, but just in different ways. And if they could tie it together, they could be an even more, believe it or not, an even more dangerous team. But all right, let's get started with some of the defensive stuff here. So first of all, I didn't do this yesterday, but let's go ahead and do it. Let's just look at all the defensive pieces and the grades and see who did what, as is the case with most games. Most players, in this case it's a little closer to 33% than usual, but most players fall into the average range, kind of the, let's call it 55 to through the 60s range, 67, 8, 9, whatever. The guys that were, let's say, underperforming, I'll give Slayton some slack here because I usually do 55 or less. He was 57, so Slayton makes the cut. Javon Bullard, actually, a 52. Again, nothing super bad seemed to happen, but we'll get to that. Kenny Clark, a 44. Kind of talked about that already, the Kenny Clark situation. Eric Wilson, a 39, which not great for a guy that just was elite the week before, but again, that was on like 5 snaps, so of course that was fake, just as much as this might be fake on 8 snaps. But then the worst news of the day, which is becoming almost an every week thing, Quay Walker is at the bottom with a 35 PFF grade. 35. Last week, our lowest graded player, Quay Walker, with a 40 PFF grade. I mean, week 1, let's see, Quay was 10th out of 18, so boy, oh boy, it's a good thing he wasn't that bad week 1. He wasn't good, but 2 weeks in a row, not only was Quay bad, not only was Quay really bad, he's been the worst player on our defense and I think on our team 2 weeks in a row. Look, I mean, there are development curves for a lot of different people. I think I would really struggle to think of a situation where somebody ended up being a really good football player for us that spent 3 years being a bad football player, and in year 3 was consistently the worst player on our entire team. And then, became really, really good. I don't think it's coming. Unless there's some, and some people have speculated this, some big position switch. Obviously Edgerrin needs to work his way out into the field. If Edgerrin becomes full-time, where does he go? Maybe maybe when he comes in, you got to shift some people around. And Quay has to go to a new spot. I mean, whatever it is you have to do, fine. If you're refusing to take Quay off the field, try him in all the different spots. Mike is not going to work. I don't think anybody liked him as a Mike. The Packers insisted on him being a Mike. I and a lot of people said strong side. Try him there. If it's not working, put him at weak side. I don't care. But do something different because right now the guy just needs to be cut. And if you want to prove me wrong, I would be all in favor of that. But I think the only way you're going to prove me wrong is by doing something different. Because what you're asking him to do is not working. Now, again, we could say, well, it's a new scheme and same excuses everybody wants to make for Kenny Clark. It's a new scheme. Some people develop a little slower. It's like, well, I don't know that it's a coincidence that the guy that's always kind of bad happens to be the guy that's really bad now. But this time it's only because of development. It could be. Could be. Maybe once he kind of figures things out, things will get better. But, the issue is when you actually look at the problem. Again, that's a nice little cop-out excuse that we can just throw out whenever we feel like it because it's convenient. The problem, though, is I feel like the issues we're seeing with Quay are the same issues we saw last time. It's kind of a slow processor. He doesn't think and react and go as quickly as a lot of other guys. He's always a half a tick too slow. And that makes a huge difference in the NFL. That's why these quarterbacks and everything bust out. Your processor is just a half a step too slow, and you go from being this elite college quarterback to a bust NFL quarterback. And that's true of all positions. I've talked about safeties. I mentioned, I think yesterday, I used to talk about it all the time, especially around draft time. A fast processor is more important than fast feet. And you can see that with Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney is not a 4.3 guy. Darnell Savage is significantly faster. Why is Xavier McKinney a better sideline-to-sideline guy? Why would you trust him in the middle of the field to be able to book it to the sideline and get there faster than Darnell Savage would? It makes no logical sense. The reason is what's between the ears. First of all, being in the right position, making sure your eyes are in the right position, understanding situational football. Maybe I look that direction because of the play, in terms of, which guy, where is my imminent threat? But then also knowing and reacting immediately. The fact that Xavier McKinney can start booking it before the quarterback even starts throwing, as opposed to maybe a different guy. I won't just pick on Savage, but maybe somebody that's less skilled than Xavier McKinney who waits until the ball's in the air, in which case, I don't care if you run a 4.2. You're not going to get there in time. The ball travels way too fast in the air. That little bit extra makes a big difference. So, I don't know. I am encouraged by Edgerrin Cooper, that's for sure. From a consistency, play down to down type of deal, I don't know how good of a linebacker Edgerrin really is. But, somebody, I don't remember who it was, made the comment that Edgerrin does all the stuff that Quay Walker can do, like all the stuff that we like Quay Walker for, his speed and as far as like blitzing and everything else. But Edgerrin is just better at it. He's faster, he's stronger, he's a better tackler, etc. So Edgerrin was one of the 60s guys. He was a 65, and he was up to 18 snaps. So he's almost doubled his snap count. And actually, let's just compare it right now. I want to look at his production compared to Quay Walker's production. Obviously, again, significant difference. So 36 total snaps compared to 186. Edgerrin Cooper has 1 sack. Quay Walker has 1 sack. He only has 1 more pressure. And that's so... Edgerrin Cooper has 1 sack on 3 attempts. Quay Walker has 2 pressures and 1 sack on 15 attempts. Which, by the way, for linebackers, there is a much higher standard. Now, if it was a defensive tackle who had 2 pressures and 15 attempts, you go, oh yeah, that's pretty good. For a linebacker, not so much. Edgerrin right now has a 74 PFF grade, a 70 run defense grade, a 91 pass rush grade, and a 59 coverage grade. Quay Walker has a 40 overall grade, a 54 run defense grade, a 47 tackling grade, a 62 pass rush grade, and a 37 coverage grade on the season. Again, give him more opportunities, and maybe Edgerrin starts to drift off because, right now they're putting Edgerrin Cooper in situations where he's probably going to succeed, whereas if you just use Quay Walker to go out and blitz, he'd probably look a lot better too, but I don't know. I saw him in coverage on one of the plays where he graded out really well, and I remember watching that just going, that is insane. Like, that is really, really good stuff. So, whatever. I don't know. I'm not wishing ill on Quay Walker. He's a Packers linebacker. I want it to succeed, but you know what? Not every hit is a hit. Not every draft pick is a hit. I think Gutekunst has done a great job with our draft picks. I think the hit rate is really, really high. But sometimes you miss. I think that this was probably an ill-advised decision to begin with. We've talked about it 1,000 times. Drafting linebackers in the first round is almost always a bad decision. And when you miss on them, it's a really, really bad decision. It's only even a debate if the linebacker hits. Because then at that point, it comes down to draft value versus positional value, in which case some people would say even if it's a hit, it wasn't worth it. But the fact that there's such a high miss rate makes it just inexcusable. Now, I understand if the board says it, then you do it, whatever. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, it's week 3. We'll see how it goes. It's about as bad as you can get for any player. And the thing is, we've been down this road with a lot of guys where they are one of our worst players every single week. And we know how it goes. I mean, we've seen it with certain guys. I mean, we saw it with, who Savage like 2 years ago, or think of the corners that we had, like, Demarius Randall and like whatever, like all these different guys that over the years, like every game, they're just, Royce Newman or whatever. You get to a point where it's like, it just stop it. Just stop. It's a disaster. Anyways, continuing on. On the positive side now, there were 5 players out of 19 that had a 70 or higher grade. Xavier McKinney was a 76. Preston Smith was a 77. Again, as soon as I start talking about Preston hasn't made an impact, the guy, we'll do the stats later, but he comes in with 4 pressures and 2 sacks on the game. I swear I talked about him at the latest, it was the third quarter. And, or at the earliest, it was the third quarter. And he hadn't done a freaking thing up to that point. So he just got absolutely unleashed. Devontae Wyatt with a 79. Jair Alexander with an 89. Call it a 90. He did have a 90 coverage grade. And Kingsley Inigbare with a 93. It was a big game for Kingsley, because Kingsley was another guy that was starting to become a serious problem. I mean, through 2 weeks, he was one of the guys that was like at the bottom 2 weeks in a row. 41 and 43 were his grades. Now, am I confident that he's going to be able to do this again? Not really, but hopefully it's enough of a confidence boost that he can kind of get back into at least like the 60s territory. You know what I mean? Like at least be an adequate player. Don't be on the... And that's what I'm asking of a lot of these guys. There are some players that are premier. Of all the players that are not premier, which is most of you, just at least be average. I don't expect perfection from everybody, and of course everybody can have bad days. Don't spend most of your time as one of the worst players in football. Don't do that. I don't want to look at the entire NFL in that position and see you on the last page where it's all just red and everybody's awful. Don't be on that page. So good job by Kingsley to have 2 games in the 40s and to currently be sitting at a 65 PFF grade, highest grade he's had since being in the NFL based on that one game. So Kingsley gets a pass. All right, looking specifically at run defense, nobody was actually horrible. TJ Slayton, the one guy that you expect to be your run defender, whose snaps are plummeting, by the way. He was clearly the number 2. Now he's down to 15 snaps in this game, partially because I'm guessing for Halfley it just doesn't work, but also, I mean, the guy's just not... You want pass rush, and you're not getting it from Slayton, although he is better at that than run defense, which makes no sense. Anyways, he had a 54.8, and then Kingsley Inigbare was the lowest at 52.4. I don't hate any of that. I think maybe if there's a problem, it's the fact that almost nobody was good. Very happy for Devontae Wyatt. He had a 68 run defense grade. I don't know if he's ever had anything but a horrible run defense grade. So I'm excited for Wyatt to actually have a acceptable run defense grade. But the guys that were actually good, Keyshawn Nixon, who again will seemingly always just be a better run defender than coverage guy. So I feel like for Keyshawn, the standard is don't be terrible in coverage and continue being very aggressive up front on the line of scrimmage. If you can do that, I think I can give you a pass. You're not Jair Alexander, whatever. But just don't be a liability. And if I don't see you getting carved up, I'm not saying don't give up any passes, but there are games, where guys give up a second to third, and, one of them's a 40-yard touchdown or what. That's when it becomes like, okay, you suck. Don't do that and stay aggressive up front. Heck yeah, I'm all in. And then Quay Walker. He was actually our highest run defender, which is great, aside from the fact that somehow you still had a 35 grade. Same for tackling. He was our highest graded tackler, which, again, is really good. Also in there was Eric Stokes, Jair, Preston, Rashawn, Wyatt, and Eric Wilson. And I'll even throw Lucas Van Ness in there with a 69. Most of the guys were fine. 3 guys terrible, Kingsley, Keyshawn, and Edrin Cooper, which, again, it's always weird when it's a good run defense grade, terrible tackling grade, but it is what it is. Pass rush, we actually had guys that graded out really well. We had Edgerrin with a 75, Preston with a 77, and Kingsley with a 93, which is surprising because PFF rarely gives out good pass rush grades, at least, for the Packers, I guess. A lot of our guys apparently are, even when the statistics are good, it's way too inconsistent apparently. But on the negative side, the only one who was really negative was Kenny Clark. He's the only one below a 55. Brutal. Just freaking brutal. Coverage, the negatives, I mean, Edgerrin had about a 55, so I guess we can cut him some slack, 54.8. Javon Bullard was a 53, again, kind of cutting it close. The really bad ones, though, were Eric Wilson, 33, and Quay Walker, 29.7, which is really the thing that killed him. And somebody actually pointed that out on Twitter where it's like, look, I mean, he graded out real low, but let's be honest. It was just coverage where he graded out poorly, and really all he gave up was one reception for 20 yards. So the entirety of what they hate about him, and granted, which is really weird for Quay Walker, 9 snaps of run defense, 41 in coverage. What are they doing with Quay? I don't know that I fully understand what happened in that game. They're putting him out just in pass situation? I don't know. I've never seen that before. 9 snaps of run defense, 41 in coverage, which, by the way, could also be why his run defense and tackling grade was so high. If you play 9 snaps and you get 1 tackle, you probably get a really high grade. But he played almost the entire game in coverage and had a 29.7 grade, which, again, production-wise, he didn't do anything wrong necessarily. But apparently he just sucked at covering everybody. I don't really know. All right, now that we're getting into the stats, let's also pull up the NFL Pro here. All right, so let's start off with PFF stats, and again, they tend to be different than a lot of other like officials because again they don't count half sacks or whatever. So this will be kind of interesting doing it this way. But let's just go through PFF because this is what we always do. This is what I like to do. As far as the disappointing people on pass rush, the only one was Kenny Clark. In other words, guys that had 0 pressures that actually pressured a number of times. You only had Keyshawn did it once and didn't get anywhere. That I don't care about. Xavier McKinney apparently rushed the passer twice, which is kind of cool to learn. He didn't have any success, though. Kenny Clark 27 times didn't get a single pressure. And I do not want to hear about this double team crap. I went back and looked at it. He's not really double teamed more than anybody else. By the way, he's been double teamed his entire career, including the last 2 weeks where his stats weren't that bad. So I just don't want to hear the excuses. Unless you got some numbers to pull up for me, don't talk to me about that stuff. All right, let's get into the people that did at least produce to some degree. TJ Slayton, again, as weird as it is, he somehow is a better pass rusher than run defender. Not that it's necessarily good, 62.8 grade, but he had 1 pressure on 11 attempts. That's roughly what you're looking for in that limited sample size. Isaiah McDuffie had 1 pressure on just 3 attempts. Quay Walker, 1 pressure on 4 attempts. Edgerrin, 1 pressure on 2 attempts. That's all great. Again, linebackers and safeties and stuff are a little bit of an outlier. They're going to have better numbers, but without actually knowing a number in my head of what you're looking for, obviously that's perfectly fine across the board. Lucas Van Ness had 1 pressure and 1 sack on 20 attempts. Now, the sack is great, but the numbers suck. You need at least 2. Right, and that just puts you at 10%. This is 5%. It's not good. Carl Brooks, 2 pressures on 25 attempts. Again, that's less than 10%. It's not what you're looking for. Rashawn Gary had 3 pressures on 31 attempts, so that's right at the 10% mark, so that's fine. Nothing special, but it's fine. Wyatt, who's becoming the best pass rusher on our team, had 3 pressures on 23 attempts, including 2 sacks. That obviously is fantastic. Kingsley had probably the best day, him or Preston. 3 pressures and 2 sacks on just 17 attempts. So the same numbers as Wyatt, but 6 less attempts. And then Preston Smith had 4 pressures and 2 sacks on 28 attempts. It's crazy we had 3 guys, and I know some of these are combined, but still, Wyatt, Enigbare, and Smith with 2 sacks. Crazy. Great day. And again, 4 pressures on 28 attempts. These are the 3 guys that really stood out, with Rashawn kind of being at the 10% mark, not good, not bad. And then most of the other guys being either somewhat below or well below. Brooks, a little under what you're looking for. Lucas Van Ness, kind of terrible. Slayton being right where you want. And Kenny, I mean, he should have had close to 3. He had 0. So that's not great. And Kenny was doing okay prior to this, as far as just the numbers, right? The run defense was what was really dragging him down, which is part of the reason why is like you kind of give him a little bit of a break. I mean, week 1, he had 4 pressures on 31 attempts. That's great. 3 pressures on 21 attempts. That's great. But I think I even said this, like, there comes a line for run defense, much like pass, if you can be a pass blocker and not a run blocker, that's okay. But when you start dipping down into the 40s as a run blocker, that's a serious problem. And Kenny's doing that with run defense. Now his run defense comes up a little bit, but he gets blanked on pressures. So I don't know. Overall, again, great performance, but you just, again, I know a lot of people are upset with Lucas Van Ness. I'm not one of them, but I'm also not saying that he's where he should be. Absolutely not. Overall in the season, 45 attempts, 3 pressures, and a sack. As a whole, that just kind of sucks. He should have closer to 5 pressures and a sack. He has 3 pressures and a sack, but we'll see, because these things, that's the thing. The 10% mark comes in bunches, right? People will come at 12%, 13%, or whatever. It's not like they get it every single game. You'll have one game with 4, 5, 6 pressures or something. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But anyways, again, on the day, especially thanks to certain people, fantastic. And really 20 total pressures and 9 sacks. Now going over to NFL Pro, again, they're going to have some different numbers. So as far as the percentages, I can't say as definitively as with PFF, but just the raw numbers, they've got 2 sacks for Preston, 2 for Wyatt, 1.5 for Kingsley, 1 for Lucas, half for McDuffie, Quay, and Edgerrin. And that is all sack percentage. 25% for Edgerrin, 16.7 for McDuff, 16.7 for Quay, 9.1% for Wyatt. Remember, this is sack percentage, not pressure percentage. 8.8 for Kingsley, 7.4 for Preston, and 5% for Lucas Van Ness. Everybody else that wasn't mentioned was 0%. Pressures, they had 4 for Preston, 4 for Rashawn, so that's 1 more than PFF said. 4 for Wyatt, that's 1 more than PFF said. 3 for Kingsley, 3 for Carl Brooks, 2 for TJ Slayton, 2 for Lucas Van Ness, 1 for Kenny, 1 for Xavier, 1 for McDuffie, 1 for Quay, 1 for Edgerrin. That's quite a bit more than what PFF said. They gave credit to quite a few guys there. As a percentage, TJ Slayton was actually the highest with his 2 pressures, 18.2%. Again, his pass rush is better than his run defense. I don't know how that happens. Actually, it's tied. Devontae Wyatt was also 18.2%. Kingsley 17.6, Preston 14.8, Rashawn 13.3, Carl Brooks 12, Lucas Van Ness 10, Edgerrin 6.7, Kenny 3.8, McDuffie 3%, Xavier McKinney 2.3, and Quay 2.3. I don't know how that's possible considering they hardly ever rush the passer, but maybe it's percentage of snaps. I don't know what they're doing here. Time to sack, so from fastest to slowest, Kingsley was the fastest, 3.12, Edgerrin Cooper 3.58. Then it was Preston, Lucas, Quay, McDuffie, and Wyatt was the slowest average time to sack at 4.9. I did notice at least one of those sacks was absolutely a coverage sack. I mean, on average, he's at 5 seconds almost. That's pretty wild, but whatever. He still came down with it. Average time to pressure, fastest to slowest. I don't have to go through every single one, but Kingsley and Cooper, 2.1 seconds. And then it was Lucas, Rashawn, Preston, Wyatt. Those guys were under 3 seconds. 3 seconds, TJ Slayton. Over 3 seconds, you got Kenny, McKinney, Carl Brooks, Quay Walker. And then the slowest time to pressure was Isaiah McDuffie at 4.2 seconds. And then quick pressures. How many times did a person pressure the quarterback under 3 seconds? Kingsley 2 times, Preston once, Rashawn once, Edgerrin once. And that's an important metric because those are the pressures that were not because of coverage. That's just because of your prowess. It's actually a really interesting number, and I wish they had it as a percentage too, because if you look at how much it reduces the total, if you look at pressures compared to quick pressures, which are pressures under 3 seconds, it erases almost all the pressures, which really goes to show how much pressure is really a function of coverage. And we've talked about that before pretty extensively, how a lot of pressure has to do with coverage and why coverage, therefore, is more important than, the guys that are covering are more important than the guys up front pass rushing, because it's almost a direct correlation between how long the quarterback holds the ball and how many pressures you get. It seems intuitive, but the amount of times a guy beats somebody so fast that even if you can get the ball out in time, he goes down, it's very rare. So the vast majority of your pressures and sacks are actually going to come from coverage. So pretty interesting to actually see the drastic change. 2, 3, 4, 5 total pressures that were under 3 seconds. They registered, I think, 27 pressures. 27. And only, 5 of them, of the 27, were under 3 seconds? That's insane. I never would have thought it was that drastic. And honestly, in my opinion, this is the most important pass rush stat, and it should be as a pressure, or as a percentage. I think I'm going to go get the percentages just because I'm curious. If you want to know who the best pass rushers are, who are the guys that can get to the quarterback in under 3 seconds? The most efficiently, effectively, fastest, whatever. Get off, the guys that are quickest across the line. Preston Smith, 0.86. Lucas Van Ness, 0.87. Kingsley, Wyatt, and Gary were also under a second. Everybody else was over a second. And then turnovers caused by pressure. Kingsley obviously was that one. Tell you what, I didn't realize we're about a half hour into this. Why don't we take our first break, and we'll be right back. All right, continuing here. Looking at stops. Again, these are tackles that are a negative play for the offense. According to PFF, 3 for Kingsley, Wyatt, McDuffie, 2 for Walker, Nixon, Smith, and 1 for Van Ness, Brooks, Stokes, McKinney, and Gary, which is 20 total. That's a lot of stops. That's a lot. NFL Pro also registers stops. They had Isaiah McDuffie at 5. The highest that they had over here was 3. They had 5 for McDuffie and 4 for Wyatt, and then 3 for Inigbare, 2 for Preston, Keyshawn, Stokes, Walker, Cooper, 1 for Gary, McKinney, and Van Ness. So NFL also has this thing called hustle plays, which I think are super cool. These are stops in which you're, I guess, hustling. Let me look at their exact definition. I forgot what it was. It's a defensive stop where the player covers 20 or more yards of in-play distance from snap to tackle. That's crazy. Because a stop is difficult to achieve in and of itself, but to cover 20 yards and get a stop, Isaiah McDuffie had 2 of them. So if you're looking for a reason to get hyped up about McDuffie again, that's one of the cool things about looking at the stats, the grades, and then also the advanced stats, because sometimes there's some hidden gems in there. They're like, oh, maybe that's why they like him a little bit. Look at some of that stuff on tape. By the way, I can pull up those plays, which is cool. I can click on it and see which ones. Keyshawn, McKinney, and Quay Walker each had 1. Getting into the coverage statistics, I'll let PFF do some of the general, even though they'll probably disagree. And then NFL Pro has more of the advanced stats. But Eric Stokes was the most targeted, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 45 yards, and a touchdown. That's a pretty rough day at the office. Isaiah McDuffie, 7 targets, 7 receptions, 63 yards given up, and a touchdown. That is a horrific day at the office. Jair, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 45 yards, and a pick. It's a lot of targets, but it's a pretty good day. Bullard, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 27 yards. He got graded out poorly, but I don't super hate that. Cooper, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 14 yards. I don't care. Quay, 2 targets, 1 reception, 20 yards. Not the huge deal. Xavier, 2 targets, 1 reception, 15 yards, and a pick. It's a darn fine day at the office. Eric Wilson, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 31 yards. It's getting up there a little bit, but it's whatever. Let's take a look at catch rate over expected. Again, this is just kind of looking at the context. You know, how good of a job did somebody do catching the ball compared to what it seemed like was expected? Xavier McKinney, the best by a mile. Negative 85.7%. So balls were caught on him 85.7% less than what would have been expected. Keyshawn Nixon, 68.3. So again, I wasn't a huge fan of his coverage, but that's a really solid statistic. Preston Smith, negative 30.5. For whatever reason, he happened to have been, actually was never specifically designated to be in coverage, but he ended up, I wonder if pressures contribute to that. Anyways, Quay Walker, negative 4%. Then you get into the bad, which is positive, and it was caught more than it should have been. Jair, 2.9. Carl Brooks, plus 5.3. I don't understand that. Stokes, 7.8. Kingsley, 11.7. Rashawn, 13.1. This must just be like when guys scramble to... I think that's what it is. So when the guys scramble to the outside, you get some of these defenders that chase, and they're out in front of the quarterback. Because we saw that before with Rashawn when he batted down the pass that one time, because he tried to throw it over Rashawn, he batted it down, and it was like a supremely negative. So we don't need to read those. It's irrelevant. McDuffie 13.7, and then Eric Wilson plus 15.6. If we just look at coverage EPA, from best to worst, Jair had the best EPA, negative 7.7. McKinney was negative 1.7. It makes sense when you get a pick six. It's going to be a massively, because 7 points when you get the pick six at least, I think. Don't care about the defensive players. Keyshawn Nixon, negative 0.8. Let's see. On the bad side, you got Eric Wilson plus 1.9, Eric Stokes plus 2.1, and then Quay was plus 5. So Quay certainly having the worst day. Eric Stokes not doing his best to hold down that position over Valentine for whenever he comes back. Let me say this too. I was actually looking at it. There's that lingering question that most people don't want to address, but it's interesting to think about once in a while. What do the Packers do in the draft? What let's just say you got a pretty decent pick, like first round. Like what is the ideal thing? I think a lot of people are looking at defensive line, pass rush, whatever, which is fair. I don't hate the idea of a corner. And it's not even because I watched Stokes and he was terrible, although he did have a bad day. It has more to do with what I was talking about where, again, you generate a pressure and there's somebody wide open right away. And what we could really benefit from is to have more guys like Jair and some of these other guys that are producing where there's just really nowhere to go. And they're not, I saw Stokes on one play, for example. Again, they're trying to lock down everybody. It fortunately didn't get thrown this way, but he just kind of ran like an out then an in, like a quick stutter step to the outside and back around to the inside. And Stokes was falling all over the place. Like he slipped to begin with. He tried to get up and like catch up to him, and he kept slipping. It's like when you're trying to run while you're falling. It was just really ugly. And it could have been a huge play down the middle if the quarterback had seen that rather than giving it to the other guy. It just feels like that could really elevate this particular defense that really needs to lean on those coverage guys to be able to play that man coverage. And I don't mean to disparage. Again, I hope Stokes can develop into that guy, and maybe Valentine is good enough. I don't know. But, if you get an opportunity to get a really good corner, it's worth possibly exploring. Average separation, which I think is very flawed for a lot of reasons, but it is interesting. The amount of separation that was given, I believe, by the time you were targeted, Keyshawn Nixon had the most separation. You generally don't want separation. 9.2 yards on average. Eric Wilson, 6.1. Again, the defense, and even the linebackers are probably getting screwed by this, the fact that they're counting those plays, because some of them might have been them in coverage, some of them might have been them going after the quarterback, which is going to screw their numbers up. But McDuffie, 4.5, Xavier, 4.5, Jair, 3.8, Stokes, 3.5, Quay, 3.2. Let's see, tight windows forced. That's kind of the fact that they throw the forced in there, I think, is an important part of that. But Eric Stokes, 14.3%, and Jair, 12.5%. Everybody else was at 0, so in other words, they didn't force any. Ball hawk percentage, 100% for Xavier McKinney, 12.5% for Jair, 0% across the board after that. Yards after the catch per reception, 21 yards for Kingsley. Again, I don't care about that. I don't like that. Quay, 4.7, Jair, 4.2, McDuff, 2, and then Stokes, 1.4. So that's all I got for the defensive pieces. Take what you like, leave the rest. I want to bring up what I talked about earlier on as far as some of the observations about the Packers pass rush. So one of the things that NFL Pro lets you do is look at a couple different splits and whatnot. And so again, keeping in mind what I had been saying, that essentially, the front four isn't really getting home. But Jeff Hafley does a good job of generating pressure when he wants to by sending extra guys. The problem is when he sends extra guys, a lot of times ball comes out, et cetera, et cetera. So that is sort of what I've been saying. Decided to actually look into it. See if it's just one of those things you say because you think you're seeing it, but you're not sure. So if we look at the Green Bay Packers, when they blitz, if you look at the pressure rate, the Packers are third in the NFL behind only the Jets and Texans. When Jeff Hafley brings at least one extra guy, they get to the quarterback. They create a pressure 55% of the time. They so far have 11 pressures, which doesn't rank super high because the Packers just don't do it very often. But again, as a percentage, 55%. There's a problem, though. If you look at their sack percentage, the Packers rank 14th. So they're not getting to the quarterback very often. Then if you look at EPA per pass, so like general success rate, how do the Packers rank? They rank 15th. Not bad, but considering how successful they are at generating pressure, why are they not successful? And again, it's because ball just gets out right away. Their actual EPA per play is negative 0.08. So when they blitz, it's marginally above average. They are generating pressure. I mean, over 50% of the time when they bring just one extra guy. Remember, they rush 4. All they got to do is bring one extra guy. And again, keep in mind, that is a base defense for a 3-4 team, which is what we ran last year. I mean, yeah, I understand nickel and all that stuff, but just could you imagine if we generated 55%, if we ran a base defense with just 2 edge rushers, 3 to 5? I mean, that's a really high number. But again, the effectiveness is not where it needs to be. What if we look at no blitz? How are the Packers doing at generating pressures when they just bring the front 4? They rank 14th. Again, not terrible. Like we're used to seeing the Packers like 29th in certain categories. We're setting a new standard here, essentially. But it's 14th. They generate a pressure 30% of the time. It's between the Giants and the 49ers. However, sack percentage is 9th, 9.7%. How about EPA per pass? They're the 6th best defense. So it's interesting. Again, as far as I can tell, this lines up exactly with the way that I saw it, although I didn't know about the front 4 being as successful as it was. If Jeff Hafley wants to dial up a pressure, he can, but it's very high risk, high reward, and most of the time it's not actually very beneficial. And as annoying as it is that the Packers don't seem to be able to generate enough of a pass rush with the front 4, it's the 6th best defense against the pass when they do that, presumably because the back end does such a good job. They actually have the 3rd most sacks in the they're tied for the 2nd most sacks of any team when they just rush 4. Minnesota has 10. Baltimore, Green Bay, the Jets, Arizona, and Seattle have 9. So it is a very interesting dynamic, and it's cool that whenever Hafley wants to get a little weird and wild and bring that pressure, it's got a real good chance of working and flustering the quarterback and all that stuff. You don't want to do it all the time because it seems as though it's kind of easy to just pick that apart. Just bing, bing, bing. But if you don't always expect it, you don't know when it's coming, and you know when it's coming, it's going to come fast. It's a nice little psychological tool to have, and it's also great that the Packers can fall back on the fact that when you rush 4, you just have a really good defense. So you can just hang out in base or in, what, I shouldn't say base, but just rush your typical 4-man front most of the time, and a lot of times you're just going to be successful. And then once in a while you bring in this blitz, it's going to be successful, and it's just a matter of can you catch them off guard and call it at the right time so that it's not one of those where they just got this quick little option to dump it off and they catch that, et cetera, et cetera. So it was kind of interesting to see that. Again, it's almost exactly as I thought I was seeing it on TV, with the one little wrinkle of being surprised how good the pass defense is for the Packers when they just rush 4. But since we're on the topic, let's just get rid of all the filters. I want to look at the Packers overall on the season, offense and defense, see how they rank. Since we're already talking about defense, let's just continue going with that. They are already all the way updated, so everybody's got their 3 teams, so we got it. Pass yards given up per game, the Packers rank 22nd. Yards per play, they rank 16th. That's more important, just means they've been passing a lot, but still, it's not, the greatest. EPA per pass, the Green Bay Packers defense ranks 10th. So I think the interceptions are a huge part of that. So the overall pass defense on a play-to-play basis is not great, but when you add in the massive amount of picks that they've had, they have the 10th best overall pass defense. The only NFC North team that's better right now is the Minnesota Vikings, who rank 7th. Detroit is 16th. Actually, where is Chicago? Are they up in the top 10? Yeah, they're 3rd. I'm sorry. I was like, there's no way Chicago's not top 10. So actually, we do have 10 defenses, or 3 defenses of the NFC North in the top 10. Total sacks, the Green Bay Packers rank 7th with 11. Actually, that's not true. They tied for 5th with 11. The Minnesota Vikings, Giants, Jets, Houston Texans are the only teams that have more sacks. As a percentage, the Green Bay Packers rank 9th with 9%. So still really high. Very impressive. The Vikings are 5th. The Packers are 9th, the Bears are 20th, and the Lions are 21st. So despite all the success and, all the talk about, the Lions with Aiden Hutchinson and the Bears' great defense, as far as getting sacks, the Packers and Vikings are the two teams getting it done. Pressure percentage, Vikings 8th, Bears 12th, Packers 14th, Lions are 29th. So again, they got that one good pass rusher, but their team sucks at getting to the quarterback. Flipping over to run defense, Packers in total yards, believe it or not, rank 10th. Just 105.7 yards given up per game through 3 games. Vikings and Lions actually are better. Bears are worse, of all things. The Vikings are second best, 71.3 yards given up per game. The Lions, 76.7. The Bears, 121.7. I suppose that's what happens when you're getting the crap beat out of you and a team decides to just run the ball all day long. See, touchdowns given up. The Packers have only given up 2. That's tied for 9th best. Yards per play is not great. It's down at 24th. Actually, that's not true. It's 22nd. They're tied for 4.7 yards per attempt. So got to hopefully clean that up a little bit. The amount of carries that are over 10 yards, they're tied for 17th. They've given up 10 of those. Stuff percentage, they're 7th. 19.4% they stuff at the line. So, if we're just kind of putting the pieces together to create a picture, it sounds like the Packers on a down-to-down, play-to-play basis do a good job, but they're far too often giving up those big rips. So it's like stop, 15-yard run, Most of the time, they're pretty good, but just way too inconsistent, especially with big plays. EPA per rush, kind of putting it all together. Surprisingly enough, again, when you put it all together, and this probably includes fumbles and everything else, Packers 10th in run defense. 10th. Crazy. Rush yards over expected. The Packers rank 25th, so that's complete garbage. 60 some odd yards. If you look at per attempt, Packers are 28th. They give up almost a yard more per attempt than they should. That just comes down to missed tackles and stuff. That's not good enough. Yards before contact per attempt, 1.29. So that's just what we're giving up on average before anybody makes any contact. They rank 15th, so it's about middle of the pack. But then yards after contact is where they really struggle. And again, it's a tackling issue. 3.44 yards after contact on average. That's dog crap. 27th, if I didn't say that. Now, with that said, the Packers play one of the lightest boxes of any team. They are the 4th most light box percentage at 67.2%. So obviously, that's going to make it harder to stop the run. And again, if you run a light box, 67%, 4th most of anybody, and you have the 10th best overall run defense by EPA, I don't know if I'm changing that either. We're getting the results one way or another. Packers run a stacked box, 18th most, just 19.4% of the time. So the difference would be running with exactly 7 in the box. Looking at total, we looked at pass defense, then run defense. Looking at overall, first of all, pass percentage, the Packers are, the heck are they? 6th most, which is to say they're passed against more than most teams, which is weird when the Packers are running a light box all the time. Points per game right now, the Packers are 12th. Not terrible, 19.3 points per game. That's pretty solid. Total yards per game, the Packers rank 20th, 328.3, not the greatest. Yards per play, Packers rank 13th, 5.5. So the discrepancy there being teams are running more plays against us. Touchdowns given up, the Packers rank 20th with 7 touchdowns given up. EPA per play, though, just overall, how valuable is the defense? 9th best defense. Again, that's all turnovers. And this is one of those really scary things, too, because turnovers are volatile. The bottom line is the picture here is that the Packers right now are a top 10 defense. Without the turnovers, they're closer to like at least a bottom 15 defense. Now, there's still some stuff that will and can clean up, but if you're looking for a high regression likelihood thing, the Packers are the one. Now, that's more of a year-to-year deal. Whereas, if they continue this through the year, you look at next year and say there's going to be a crap defense next year. But just something to keep an eye on. Right now, they are a top 10 defense, though, so we're going to call it what it is. All right, flipping over to the team offensive side, how good the Packers offense has been. Their passing percentage is 32nd. They pass the second least of any team in the NFL right now, which is a hilarious thing because they have been probably the most run-heavy team the last 2 weeks and are 2-0, using a strategy that doesn't work in today's NFL. Now that Jordan Love's back, that's going to change. Whole new offense coming. So best of luck to the Vikings for figuring that out. Points per game, again, despite Malik Willis being our quarterback the last 2 weeks, 7th best in the NFL, 25 points per game. Minnesota is the only team that's higher in the NFC North. They are 3rd with 28.3 points per game. Yards per game is even better. The Lions are the best in the NFC North with 4th, 399.7. The Packers are 5th, 391. Oh, it's tied. Oh, no, 399.7. We're 391.7. It gets better. Yards per play. Again, the most run-heavy team in football has the second highest yards per play at 6.4. How stupid is that? Baltimore is the only team that's higher. We're ahead of the Buffalo Bills, the 49ers, the Vikings, the Lions, the Cardinals, the Saints, all these teams that are slinging it. Packers are higher than. Touchdowns, though, are tied for 16th. They have 6 touchdowns. That's the thing we're got to do better at actually scoring. EPA per play, the Packers are 10th. So based on EPA, kind of top 10 across the board, offense and defense at least. Not the greatest in the world, 0.03. It is positive. The only 2 NFC North teams are the Vikings and the Packers. Vikings being 8th, Packers being 10th. Lions are 13th, and the Bears are 31st. Passing yards per game, not surprisingly, Packers are 22nd at 187.7. Considering, again, they're the 31st most pass-heavy offense, to be the 22nd in yards is not terrible. In fact, you can find the difference in yards per play, where the Packers rank 3rd in passing yards per play with 7.7. Buffalo and the Saints are the only 2 teams that have a higher yards per play passing than the Packers. Ridiculous. EPA per pass, the Packers have the 6th best passing offense in football. Best in the NFC North, just the Jets, 49ers, Commanders, Saints, and Bills. Commanders. Go figure, right? Jeez. Imagine being a team that knows which rookie quarterback to pick. Bears can't imagine that. And then rush yards per game, the Packers remain number 1 by a slim margin. 204 rush yards per game. The Baltimore Ravens closing in at 203.3. Rushing yards per play, the Packers are 2nd behind the Baltimore Ravens. Packers at 5.5. So one of the best passing teams in football. They just don't pass a lot. Oh, and one of the best rushing teams in football. Ridiculous. Now, EPA per rush is not going to be as flattering. They're still on the positive side. Actually, no, they're not. They're negative. 0.01. They're basically at 0, whatever. They're tied for 14th with the Patriots. Again, I don't necessarily super care about that. A lot of that, we watched it happen. You got everybody kind of loading up the box, trying to take that away from the Packers because Malik's in there. We're running the ball a ton. Freaking penalties, taking back all our good runs. Whatever. I don't care. Total quarterback pressures from best to worst, meaning least to most, the Packers rank 4th. Now, that's total. So if you throw the ball less, you're going to have less pressures. But still, Malik/Jordan has faced the 4th least amount of pressure. As a percentage, though, it's 10th, still pretty solid, 28 points. Actually, no, it's 9th, tied, 28.7% with Dallas. So the 9th least amount of pressure they've had to face. So again, as much as we can complain about the offensive line, and there's reason for it, keeping things in perspective, looking at the full context, Packers got it pretty good. If we look at sacks, the Packers are tied for 8th least with just 5 sacks so far on the season. As a percentage, though, the Packers are 13th, 6.8% sack rate, still on the positive side of the dividing line at 16. Looking at blitz percentage, the Packers are ranked 27th. That is to say that they are the 6th most blitzed team, which adds even more respect to what the offensive line has done. The fact that the pressure and sack percentages are as low as they are, despite being one of the most blitzed teams in football. And again, that is not going to be the case when, maybe against Minnesota, because I think they do it a lot. That is not going to be the case, though, going forward with Jordan Love at quarterback. You don't blitz guys like Jordan as much as you blitz guys like Malik. Team Actually, this is for passing. Yards after the catch over expected. Packers rank second in the NFL. The Eagles are the only team with a higher yards after the catch over expected. And remember, the Packers pass less than most teams. I don't have a yards after the catch over expected per play metric here, but I'm guessing it'd be real high. In fact, I can tell you right now, I can see the pass plays. The Eagles are the only team that are higher. They have had 109 pass plays. The Packers, 73. The yards after the catch, over expected for the Packers, is through the freaking roof. This is a scary offense, man. The defense might be very turnover dependent, but if they can keep doing that, and the Packers offense can keep doing what they're doing with Jordan, holy crap. Average separation, Packers right now are tied for 12th, 3.7 yards average separation. Third in the NFC North. The Vikings are 5th. The Lions are 7th. Let's see. Any interesting rush stuff that we haven't looked at yet? I don't know. Rush yards over expected per attempt. The Packers tied for 3rd. So again, well, the success rate isn't very high and all that kind of stuff. Right. But how about over expected? So again, EPA and success rate are just saying, did you do a good job? Over expected says, did you do more than you would have expected given your situation? It's a much more nuanced look at things. If you look at success rate in EPA, the rushing has not produced. But compared to what it should have produced, it's overproducing. The Packers rank 3rd in rush yards over expected per attempt, 1.3 yards more than what would have been expected in a typical situation. Only the Eagles and Colts rank higher. Yards before contact, the Packers surprisingly rank 6th. That's basically an offensive line metric. It doesn't have to be. That can be, a running back if he gets to the outside and, before anybody touches him kind of thing. But that's still an impressive metric. 6th highest. They get 1.78 yards of basically free yards before anybody touches them. Okay, what happens as soon as somebody touches them? They rank 4th in yards after contact. So they're one of the best teams at generating yards before anybody touches them. And then once somebody touches them, they're the 4th best team at generating yards after they get touched. Almost 4 yards, 3.73 yards after they get touched. Only the Titans, Patriots, and Jaguars are higher. Yeah, but do they face a light box the most? Well, no, they're 13th. 13th most. So on the other side of more often than not, actually it's 47.7%, but no, not really. And even, I mentioned the stack box thing. The Packers actually don't face a stack box very often either. In fact, almost never. 13.5% they face a stack box. That ranks 26th. So I'll have to retract any of those statements about them stacking the box to take away the run. They don't. They might have a 7-man box, like a normal box, and there might be more aggression as far as, playing downhill from the safeties, et cetera, playing up on the line, whatever. There's other things you can do other than stacking the box. But as far as saying that they stacked the box against us, that's not true. In fact, we faced less stacked boxes than all but 6 teams over these 3 weeks. So there we are, man. I think you got to be happy with where we're at. I understand that we faced a couple bad teams the last few weeks, and that's going to make you look pretty good. But you got to feel good with, I think what you could probably, depending on what metric you prefer, you could probably feel pretty comfortable saying the Packers offense and defense is roughly top 10 in both right now. Again, some people just like the points per game. Some people like EPA, whatever you want to use. I don't know. There's a billion different metrics out there. They all answer the question slightly differently. If you just care about production and don't care about the details, then yeah, points per game is a pretty good place to look. Which matters only, I think, looking backward. I think if you want to look forward, you need more nuanced context than that. So if you just want to say how good have they been and I don't really care about the excuses, fine, you can look at things like that. But if you're trying to predict the future, you need to understand how good the team is in its full context. So anyways, again, do whatever you want to do. I'm just providing you all the information. I'm going to get out of here, though. You guys have a great rest of your day. We're going to have to get into laughing at the enemy pretty soon here, possibly starting tomorrow. There might just be 2 days of it. I'm just saying, we need a day of preparing for the Vikings. In other words, really understanding them. We need another day of, like on Sunday, really, aside from talking about the games, kind of giving final thoughts on the game. Aside from that, though, I think it's wide open. We might be okay to